Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Starting Nine. I am Martino Puccio. Alongside me is my co-host, Mike Phillips, and we are here to talk 9 different segments of Major League Baseball today. And boy, is there a lot regarding the New York Mets, Mike. We'll start off and rip it. Even this is like the funny part about the Mets and Major League Baseball. I know we're big Mets guys. I know we're always on top of that kind of stuff. But however, it just always feels like they're the team with the headlines and the most to talk about, right? If you look across Major League Baseball, the only real thing which we'll discuss is Bryce Harper and the Philadelphia Phillies. The rest is kind of just, status quo as things go, as teams gear up for the World Baseball Classic, or the Players, rather. And of course, our good old owner, Stephen Cohen, had a nice comment about the Mets captain situation. So you kind of set the table for this and the comments overall, and give me your thoughts, because he basically flat out said, as long as I'm the owner of the team, the New York Mets will not have an official captain.
Yeah, basically, he has this whole media availability. He's hitting the dugout in Port St. Louis. He talks about a bunch of things, and one of the big things is I don't believe in a captain. Like, the locker room is his own thing; it'll sort itself out here. Like, it's fine. He doesn't There's no need for Steve Cohen to weigh in as a captain. The room will sort of figure it out itself. I think. Outside perspective, think it's Francisco Lindor. It wasn't even a headline because last year we had all this hubbub about, when David Wright's getting his number retired, we can name Lindor the captain now. And then there was speculation that this didn't happen because Brandon Nimmo wanted to be the captain and Pete wanted to be the captain. And then Steve just said, you know what? No captains. I'm not dealing with this.
So do you think that even adds more validity to that Nimmo story or rumor that there was internal fighting over captain or someone who felt that they were entitled to it? Because the way the story kind of comes across, and this is just, again, speculation, that Nimmo was the one kind of feeling entitled to that captaincy role because he was the longest tenured Met and all that sort of stuff, fan favorite, whereas Lindor, kind of not the same thing. And you hear the internal struggles of the Mets dressing room soccer terms. So I think that kind of adds to it, because Steve saw from within on what happened, that this locker room did not have the same vibe as it did in 2024. And there can be extenuating circumstances for that. Mendoza spoke about it with the New York Post. For me, it's a non-story. I think he handled it perfectly in the way he stated it, as you mentioned. Let the locker room figure that out. Let those guys be leaders. You don't need a literal captain like you have to vote for in the NFL. This is our guy, or even in the NHL as well. Major League Baseball, it's always kind of been arbitrary if they select one.
Yeah, the NHL is the one where the captain is really a big deal. And because you actually have to have the C on your jersey, and you are a team leader, is a reason why, when the Rangers didn't have a captain after they traded Jacob Trouba last year, there was a whole thing who's the next captain going to be? And then it turned out to be JT Miller. And it doesn't matter in baseball. I mean, the Mets have had, 5 captains in their lifetime. I think the first one was Keith in '87. I think Keith and Carter were co-captains. Then Franco had it, Wright had it. And we didn't have this whole discussion when Wright retired. Oh, who's the next captain? It'll sort itself out.
Yeah, and I think Cohen makes a great point in that, not just that, there's tons of leaders that could be there in the locker room. Marcus Semien is always that kind of guy in the first place that's high character. Same goes for Bo Bichette. It's the collective. And I think people focusing on an individual that's supposed to be a leader kind of takes away from the entire point of what leadership is. And it's not about the you, it's about the collective. And guys like Soto, Lindor, Semien, and Bichette are kind of those higher character guys. And you hear a lot of positives of even just the other players coming up, like Jorge Polanco is obviously not one of those guys, but just another one that they added this offseason that fits that mold of come in, do your work. And this, riff in the locker room, this didn't start just last season. You remember when Tommy Pham was making comments about the work ethic of players on the New York Mets. So this was kind of a lingering thing. Was it a bigger deal than we all kind of had anticipated? I'm not saying that they're the only locker room like this, but it kind of sounds like it really was, by not only these comments, the moves, and other comments from other players.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, how good Jose Iglesias was at his job, considering like he showed up last year and then like they all became like the
and JD Martinez, yeah.
Yeah, well, JD was there. They were struggling. He was there. It really when Iglesias comes up, but they have the OMG culture. Everybody sort of buys in.
Well, they were saying like JD was a huge part of that locker room too, with the veteran presence. But you're right. I mean, Iglesias. I mean, not everyone can come up with a big hit song, so it's kind of difficult to repeat that. Just any of your final thoughts on that? To me, I am not fazed by this. The captain doesn't matter. I feel like that's really only reserved for unique situations and players. And the Mets kind of aren't in that situation. And considering all the hubbub around that topic, I'm okay with Cohen commenting like that. And he's always going to do this anyways. This is not surprising.
Yeah, Steve likes to talk to the media, which is nice. He compared to some of the other owners in this town who like never make their faces for known to the media. But I will say, like, I think there has been a wide assumption that like it was going to be Lindor because like Cohen is like his first major acquisition was Lindor, and like I know like he's like considered like basically a close friend of the Cohen family. So like I think Cohen wanted to avoid the idea of I'm going to stick my thumb on the scale and insert Lindor in that role. Maybe the room doesn't want him to be that guy, so let the room sort it out.
Yeah, I think that's the proper way of looking at it. So speaking of other players, a little bit of a slow player integration for the New York Mets. Steve Phillips, who we'll talk about a little bit later in the program, had brought this up. Man, it's spring training. I don't care. Keep it safe. I've read that Brett Beatty is among one of those players who felt a little bit of tightness in his hamstring a couple weeks ago. So obviously slowly gearing back up. That's the entire point of spring training. Or a Polanco being another. I know there's a couple other players on this list, Mike, but talk about such a non-story. I know we're discussing it, but like, come on, just slowly integrating in players so they don't get hurt. That's the entire point of spring training.
This is basically the same thing as like NBA load management when the game, especially when the games don't matter. Does it like is Luis Robert or Alvarez or Polanco have a material worse season if their first spring training game is on March 7th instead of February 27th? No. Like it's a matter of like if you think like and this could be, reading too much into the analytics of everything, and they have a sports science department. Maybe some of the data says, you know what, like Luis Roberts had issues with injuries. Maybe we can sort of ramp up a little bit to make sure he's healthy. Maybe we'll make sure that, Brett Beatty tweaked his hamstring. Let's not rush him to the outfield. Make sure he's ready to go on opening day. Like this is just, whatever. This is a whatever story.
It's a damned if they do, damned if they don't Mets moment, right? Like they rush these guys back to appease to everybody. They get hurt and then they miss the start of the regular season when games matter, as you mentioned, or they do this and they're still getting shit for it. This is exactly what we were talking about with the Luke Weaver situation just last week. It's only them. Like, I just don't understand how, and maybe because we react to it, other people react to it, of us getting annoyed about them talking about it, not necessarily the topic itself. It's just silly. And who knew when the Mets did something competent, they would still get flack. This is a complete non-story. I am more than okay with that. Luis Robert has an injury history. We know Alvarez has had some issues staying healthy in his young career so far. Enough. Like, I just don't want to hear it. So
there's a lot of we'll talk about this, I'm sure, throughout the pod run here, the Mets for clicks narrative, where a lot of like writers or media personalities say, oh, we'll just, trash the Mets to get the fans angry and get them like to either read our articles or call into our shows and whatnot. And the Luke Weaver thing specifically was just like a certain play-by-play announcer in the Bronx had a massive ego about the Yankee situation and wanted to put his 2 cents in and ran in with it. And I know another certain radio voice in this town also magnified it because he likes to pump up the Yankees at all costs. And there was like the same voice basically saw Marcus Semien show up to camp a few days later, his Texas bag. He's like, nah, respect, bro. Texas is a champion. Like Sammy's a champion there. Like this is not your rival. I'm like,
that's like the laziness of it all. Like that, you're not even standing on your ground. Hate them all then. If Semien's bringing in an opposing club's gear, then why isn't the same energy of Luke Weaver? Is it because Luke Weaver was on the Yankees then he left? It's just stupid.
That's for clicks.
Yeah. Well, I think Knicks for clicks sounds better. We got to find out a better term there. But you know who sounds and looks good so far? Tobias Myers, Mike.
Yes.
So for the opening day roster, I felt like this would have been a lock. You kind of brought this up as like a topic. So speak to me on this. Why was this sort of like maybe doubtful for certain people? Or
I think it was interesting that like Because as we talked about Tobias Myers, I think the last time we spoke was like, okay, he's going to stretch out as a starter in camp. And there have been some speculation. Okay, if they get through camp healthy, which again, with this group, who knows? Like, if the 6 guys ahead of him are healthy, there's like, like, if he's healthy, he has an option left, maybe send him down, keep him stretched down, in case something happens. But Mendy made a point when say, no, Tobias is on the opening day roster. If he's not, if everybody gets to the gate, he's going to be out of the bull, working out of the bullpen at that point. So I think that's just interesting to clarify. He felt the need to do that, which I think is something that was interesting because, like I said, they have a lot of bullpen competition. If all 6 starters do make it to the gate, like they only get carry 7 relievers, so like he's going to be in that mix regardless. Whereas like that might push guys like Kimbrel and Brazoban into competition for like 1 role instead of 2.
Yeah, I think this also clearly defines where he's going to be to start the year, which is great. Obviously, stretching them out as starters to begin with is something that plenty of ball clubs do, right? We discussed that. So to have that role kind of solidified instead of, him having to answer questions in the coming weeks because he's already had to answer questions on the dumbest of topics. Oh, hey, what are you doing with Tobias Myers? Is your 6th starter? Are you running with 6 starters? And David Stearns, even though he had to literally clarify for everybody, we're going to cross that bridge when we get there, defining something for Tobias Myers. And you and I both believe that he's going to be a high leverage arm in the back end of games for the Mets this year. I still stand by the fact that he's going to be the setup man. And I think we were both on the same page of it. I think it'll happen by Memorial Day, the latest, to be quite honest with you. As long as he's healthy, I think he's going to produce.
Yeah, I also said the Myers thing. I think what does tell you is that he's higher on the pecking order for the rotation depth than we thought initially, because like we saw last year when obviously Manaea and Frankie Montas both got hurt in spring. The Mets had to carry both Griffin Canning and Tyler McGill in their open day rotation. They're coming in with 6. If 2 guys get hurt again, it could seem like, okay, they would prefer to put Myers there and use some of their flexibility to carry a couple extra bullpen guys than to, leave Myers in the pen and say, okay, Christian Scott's your turn.
Yeah, exactly. Which he's been getting a lot of rave reviews so far, Christian Scott. So it's nice to hear. It's refreshing. He's been attacking hitters. We'll see what happens. It kind of sounds like AAA to get work back up because he's obviously missed so much time due to Tommy John surgery. Any other final notes from Mets camp before we move on here, Mike?
Yeah, no, I think we're pretty good. I think like we covered the gist of it. There's a lot because this is still the perfect time for the best shape of his life times of the game. Yep. Like this is I learned to do pitch this off season. I changed my arm slot, which Sean Manaea told us. He went back to his arm slot. Like it's like that. Like always, everybody's sunshine and rainbows right now, pretty much.
Yes. You know what? Sunshine and rainbows. Apparently,
sure.
Pete Alonso moving over to the Baltimore. Everything is perfect. Everything is great. He's at a place where he feels appreciated.
LFGL.
That's what the story has been reported about. Yep. David Lennon, I'm pretty sure, was the one who had this story. So go and break it down for the folks.
Yeah, basically, David Lennon for Newsday does this whole story of how, Pete's in Baltimore. He's happy. He's with somebody who appreciated him. And I think this is the biggest load of garbage here, considering that, like, we forget a year ago, nobody wanted to give Pete Alonso a contract. And the Mets came back and said, okay, here's a deal for you. We gave you a nice salary. We let you break the home run record. We had a whole ceremony for the middle of the season to commemorate the home run record. We got it prior to a game in August. We celebrated that. We got a video from Darryl Strawberry talking about this. Yeah. He chose to opt out, which is his right. But he's trying to basically, in my opinion, have it both ways, where like he's saying, okay, like I am not the bad guy because I left. The Mets are the bad guys. They didn't want me, which I think is a load of garbage because like if you're trying to envision yourself in the David Wright mold, David Wright was not only number one, not screw 2 teammates over for All-Star bid like he did in 24 when he wouldn't do the game, wouldn't do the home run derby for Manfred unless he was in the game. And after a crushing loss like 162 last year when the Mets collapsed in epic fashion and missed the postseason, 5 minutes after the game ends, in uniform, I'm opting out. Bye, guys. Like, you can't have both ways, in my opinion. You either want the money or you want to be loved. I don't think you get both.
Yeah, and to say that the Mets didn't want him is such a misguided statement too, because they didn't want him on his terms.
Yes.
He wanted the 5-year deal. He only got one offer on the 5-year deal. Everyone else, Boston, the Mets, whatever other teams were lurking, were going about 3 years. Even the season prior to that, where they re-signed him after his late season heroics, after a terrible second half in 2024, by his standards and what he wanted to be paid like, also rejected a 7-year offer from the Mets, champagned around as the best productive hitter that they've developed since David Wright himself, right? The 53 home run season, the LFGM, getting behind that gimmick, getting behind the polar bear gimmick. He was beloved by Mets fans and Mets ownership alike. And to your point, it was his right to opt out. It was also their right to think that he wasn't going to be that good 5 years from now, which was the entire point from not only this offseason, the offseason prior, and the negotiations before that. So this idea that the Mets didn't appreciate him when almost every single player that has left the organization since Steve Cohen took over, you could look at Verlander, you could look at Max Scherzer, and some other players that also left rather unceremoniously, had nothing but good things to say. But yet Pete is going out like this. For me, he's not stated anything publicly that would say, oh, I am no longer caring about Pete Alonso. But the amount of stories surrounding him and talking about him and his coverage in Baltimore, it always comes across like he's so desperate to be liked and beloved and be this sort of figure that's being forced upon people instead of him just being himself and being welcomed and liked and appreciated by so many. I just think, to your point, you're right. I just don't understand a person, right? And I don't know Pete like that just feels this entitlement that you have to be beloved by everybody. And again, to your point, it has to be on your terms. I just don't get it. Every single Mets fan would probably cheer for him whenever Baltimore comes back to Queens and they face them.
Mid-September, by the way. That's when Baltimore comes in.
Okay, so they're coming back for that. And that's great. That'll be fascinating storylines to see where those two teams are at that point in time. Yeah, to me, this is just sour grapes. This puts a damper on his legacy of sorts. Again, this isn't him coming out and saying it, but where there's smoke, there's fire. We also haven't heard this stuff from like Brandon Nimmo too. It's just, it always seems like it's the Mets' fault when Alonso comes up in the media. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're not wrong. Another point to the not appreciation to him, it wasn't this regime, but Billy Epler offered him a 7-year extension. He turned down. So it's not like
that was the one I was referencing. Yeah, it was Epler. So
yeah, he didn't get he had a chance to sign long term with the Mets and said no, I wanted to get more money. Which again, he's allowed to do that. He's allowed to say I'll go to the market and test my luck and see if I can do this. And I think he benefited from the fact that Baltimore clearly wanted a power bat, and when they struck out on Schwarber, they just said let's get Pete now before the market collapses on us. So
well, on top of their new ownership losing that huge piece in Corbin Burns the season prior after they traded for him, and hearing about they're going to spend all this money and they got this great young core and young talent in the farm system that's coming through. Pete Alonso there, of course they're going to champagne him around like he's some guy. That's their first big ticket free agent and God knows how long. One of their first big contracts since when, right? Chris Davis, you want to say, or whatever extension they're probably going to give to one of their players. This Pete Alonso thing is it's just a headache. And I think the Mets actually got rid of it. As much as I liked Pete Alonso, I never was a lover of him. You know this. I was never a big lover of any of these players, really. So for me, it's just like, all right, don't let the door hit you on the way out, and best of luck in Baltimore. Final thoughts on Pete not being appreciated, if you have any.
Again, we'll point this out here. Like, as a ball player, the Mets are going to miss the guaranteed, 160 games, like 35 home runs, 100 plus RBIs. Like, that's not easy to replace. Like, Jorge Polanco is probably going to get them half of that, I would think, in terms of like power production. And maybe miss some time. Like, that's not to say like that the Mets aren't going to miss him. I don't think they're going to miss like some of the shtick and the sideshow stuff that came with Pete towards the end of his tenure. I don't think they'll miss that.
Pete is a Mets Hall of Famer, not a baseball Hall of Famer, and I think there's a huge difference that fans need to realize with that. So,
I will push back on that a little bit. I think in the era we're in, if he gets to be a 500 home run hitter, I think he will be in the Hall of Fame.
I don't think so. I actually disagree. I think that power numbers are a bit overstated, and there's so many other metrics that he's poor at, especially defensively, that scream that he's not as good. And also, that's under the assumption, right, that you were saying he plays this well for that long. The power numbers could be there, but we saw guys like Carlos Delgado, who's infinitely better hitter, fell like 27 home runs short. I think he was around like 473 or something like that.
That's what I said. I think the writers still treat 500 with reverence unless you did steroids. I think if Pete gets there, and this is a spot where we don't know who the next 500 home run guy is. I know there's that debate with Stanton. Like if he gets there, will he be in all the injuries? I think
Judge has a great shot at it if he's healthy.
Judge will get there. It's a matter of as long as he doesn't because he's had a couple of 60 home run seasons in there.
Soto's also got like a kind of an outside shot. Depends. He's still relatively young. But I get it. The Alonso thing for the Hall of Fame. No, I just think there's no shot. And I know you're, just to clarify for other people, for yourself, you're not saying that he's a Hall of Famer. It's just like how you view the book.
If he trends this way, I think he's at 268 homers ish now. Like if he gets to 500, I think he has a strong case.
I don't know. I don't even. Yeah, that's if he hits another 40 home runs again in the season. We'll see. Speaking of the Mets in their past, well, there's a couple actually coming down. 3 of the last 4 topics actually involve former Mets. Steve Phillips, he hates him. It was always interesting to hear Steve Phillips' perspective for many years on MLB Network and ESPN. He was always fine there. Nothing really out of pocket, audacious from him. We know his kind of history as a general manager and, some of his other antics and stuff. He's never really been a villain in the media for the Mets. But boy, did he have a week, Mike. So basically saying the Mets did not improve at all. They're going to finish in 3rd place. And am I missing anything else?
It seemed like he was very much on like in the initial, remember back in December when they first lost Pete and Diaz. I remember Jim Bowden had like a Clippers basically screaming like, "What do you do the culture of the building with those guys going out?" Like, like he was very connected to like the Mets made a mistake parting with these longtime guys who've been there, like Pete and Nimmo and McNeil. I do think like he's in that camp where he feels like, like these guys have been there forever. And like, sure, some of them were good to him with access. So maybe he like feels more attached to them, feels that the Mets did them wrong by blaming them for what happened here. But like, it's hard to look at them and see what happened last year and say, you know what, like they actively tried to change things. This is not the Yankees bringing back basically everybody who was on the playoff roster last year when they won 94 games, which again, make the argument one way or another. But this is a spot where, he just, I think has like maybe connections that are maybe like weighing him in a little bit, biasing a little bit towards saying, okay, is Bobichet going to work in this market? Like Robert did not have a good year at the White Sox. He's basically looking for every possible negative he could find, in my opinion.
Yeah, which is funny because you could spin so many positives that way. Like Bobichet's a fantastic contact hitter. What if Luis Robert actually does stay healthy and is on a better team and that change of scenery is legit? He could be a 30-30 guy, no problem. Lindor is obviously based off of what we know with a hamate bone, he's not going to have that power for a little bit. Listen, he's entitled to his opinion. He could say what he wants regarding if the Mets are going to be better or not, but to kind of insinuate that this was a bad offseason is silly on paper, honestly.
He's going glass half empty basically on every move they make.
Exactly. And I understand it from the first base perspective. We were just talking about it. Jorge Polanco obviously is going to be a downgrade offensively on Pete Alonso, but there are other areas in his game that are, better than what Pete does. And I'm sure we'll see that. I don't understand how anyone can dislike the Luis Robert trade when he's clearly an upgrade on Tyrone Taylor and the White Sox general manager thinks Luis Angel Acuna can play all 9 positions on the diamond and be a switch hitting power hitter. I don't get it. It was a clear robbery on that front. Bo Bichette is one of the best contact hitters in baseball. So all of a sudden there's hyper focus on his defense. But when Pete Alonso was here being a power hitter, nobody was talking about his defense because his scoops were okay. And by the way, they haven't played any official games. It's just watching Bo Bichette take warm-ups and they're like, oh, well, that guy sucks. Sure. So every time that we see people take warm-ups now in any sport, we should go off of that instead of their entire track record, which is not a great defensive shortstop. But the point being, he's a great hitter. I know.
Yeah, I got a great example of that too, because I remember with the Nick Castellanos stuff with the Phillies, like where like he was talking about getting cut, and like I know there was speculation that basically was confirmed with the Padres signs, like, oh, we're moving to first base, and like I know Ken Rosenthal did like a thing on Foul where it's like, this could be a very smooth idea for the Padres, and he's never played a game at first base, whereas if the Mets do it, what are the Mets doing? They're idiots, so on and so forth.
Moving a right fielder to first base, second time the Phillies have done that, right, with Harper. But then a middle infielder going to first base, which makes a lot more sense, is suddenly a stupid idea.
Yep.
It's funny how David Stearns is a very smart guy and they all respect him, but the second he makes a decision like that, he's suddenly an idiot. I don't know. I don't get it. But ultimately, listen, Steve Phillips, kind of disappointing to hear about it, but I don't really care. He's always going to be known as the guy who traded away Scott Kazmir. So, right. If I'm pretty sure he was the GM at the time.
Yeah,
so
I know it was not. Actually, it was not. It was Jim Duquette who did that trade.
It was Duquette. Oh, Phillips was prior to that.
Phillips built the 2002 match, which that's its own disaster class.
I don't think anyone ever wants to think about 01 to 04. That's history.
01, to be fair, was drafting off that World Series team. They had issues where, like they had the whole thing where A-Rod was supposed to ask for all these perks, and they didn't want to pay him. And then they signed Kevin Appier for a year, and then they said this really like star-studded off season where they go Roberto Alomar, Mo Vaughn, Jeremy Burnitz, and like all these moves like busted in their face. Like that was the 02 Steve Phillips Mets.
Well, I mean, that is sort of his legacy at this point. A legacy not looking too good at the current moment is Tony Clark, also former Met, played on a plethora of teams. He's got a scandal here, stepping down. Obviously, this would be big regardless because of the upcoming CBA, right? Because of, and I say CBA scandal, sorry, Players Association. Listen. This is Imi Udoka levels of like indefensible.
Yeah.
Of what happened here. If true, right? I still think it's alleged. I don't think this fully came out, but this is the story.
Yeah, like it's not good.
It's bad. It's on like personal levels in that relate to the Clark family, what they have to deal with, and that being leaked, if true, horrible.
Yeah, the family reunion is not going to be fun this year.
I don't think they have a family at this point. They're going to have to figure that out. Best of luck to them. As far as going into next offseason, I mean, there's been mixed things on Tony Clark, especially when he's made certain statements. I know Scherzer has taken exception to them in the past, and some other players, some of the top leaders in the players union, who will also talk about another former Met that commented on this sort of stuff. I don't know anything about the person replacing Tony Clark. I don't know what they're going to be able to do, but I do know this.
Yeah, I can weigh on the guy they picked for the guy.
But my final point on this before you take over, it doesn't implicate this salary cap proposal from the owners. The players are still going to push back against it. We already have comments from them, but as far as this go, is it that big of a deal that Tony Clark is no longer going to be the president of the PBA?
It is a big deal. Anytime you change negotiators right before the start of the CBA talks is a big deal. And we know that Tony Clark's had a mixed tracker because the players are not happy with the 2017 CBA they signed, where they basically like got railroaded by the owners. And then we had a protracted lockout in 22 that basically pushed the season back a week. Like there's like anytime you're changing leadership for a big labor negotiation is not a good situation. And the owners, I don't think, will be happy with the replacement here because Dan Hallam, I think, took over for him. And like, he is like a basically like bulldog negotiator who, like, if you're reading some of the reports today from some of the players, I feel like they're like going to be even like stronger in I'm not touching a cap situation here. And we're going to talk about the cap in a few minutes about why it's not the panacea that everybody seems to think it is. And like the people who are saying you should miss a whole season for a salary cap are complete idiots. But like, I do think like, this guy is going to be galvanize his group to make sure that like we are not taking a cap under any circumstances.
Yeah, I don't think the cap was ever a realistic thing, and that's the very next segment here with Bassett. The idea of the salary cap is only really coming from the bottom part here of ownership. I'm trying not to slander the perceived smaller ball clubs or operating small markets. But it's obviously coming from there. The teams who traditionally do not spend, despite generating hundreds of millions of dollars, playing in dumps of stadiums that the public pay for.
Yes.
Have the audacity to sit there and say, oh, we don't have any of this. But we'll at simultaneous, Mike, we see it. How many times, right? We work in media. Oh, look at the streaming. Apple's doing great. Oh, we're going to be on Peacock now. Oh, we're going to go over there. Actually, we're growing amongst these younger demographics for the first time in how many years, right? These changes to the rules changed everything in terms of
not only that, they're having records of people going to the games, actually buying the tickets.
Records for a sport that was perceived dead. So now when we're hearing, oh, salary cap, this salary, no, it's not about salary cap. Maybe tighter regulations in a salary. Everyone wants a salary floor. I think it's the most likely thing. Steve Cohen even commented on it.
Yeah, Steve Cohen, I think, said basically like I'll go once to go to the league, and I think I'm spending too much. That's fine, but like I think the bigger issue is like, yes, we talked about this before. The Dodgers are their own issue, whereas like they have advantages.
They're an anomaly.
that I think like you kind of need to try and neutral it to make it so it's not like the Dodgers spending $600 million on payroll, including tax, and you have the Marlins spending 70. That's a problem in the sport. But like the issue is more like we'll get into it in a minute here. Like the salary cap is not cure all. Like it does not like just because you cut the Dodgers off on the and the Mets off on the high end does not mean you're making it easier for the guys on the low end to actually meet the floor.
Yeah, and there's perfect examples of that in the NBA. The NBA is the ultimate one right now with the amount of money that they generate relative to their salary cap. The NFL salary cap's a little bit more complicated than the NBA. The NBA, you know this, right? Boston Celtics under Wick Grusbeck had no problem paying all this luxury tax and the penalties that came with it because they knew that they built a winner. However, you got the Oklahoma City Thunder who potentially may or may not want to pay those penalties, right? Over the long term when they have to give the super maxes to the other very young, talented players that they have. So to the point that you're making, salary cap actually doesn't change anything in that situation, which we'll kind of just hop right into it. So Chris Bassett gave this long response about salary cap. He was hitting home on parity, which I don't think actually supports this argument in particular, because parity is one of those things that we know baseball has a good amount of because they had their first repeat winner in a quarter of a century, right? Like we know that hasn't been the issue there. It's really about the issue of spending and who isn't and who's complaining about it. You mention it. Not everyone could be the Dodgers. I think everyone knows that. And I think the rules that have helped the Dodgers in this moment in time are unfair. And everybody agrees with it, and that'll be fixed. However, we're not asking the Miami Marlins to spend $600 million per season or whatever the figure is. What we're asking for them is, can you get to 150? Can you be competent? Can you hand out major league contracts? We're not asking you to even be in the top half of the payroll. We're just saying when you have players that are worth paying, same thing with Milwaukee, do you even want to entertain it? To an extent, I kind of understand the Detroit Tariq Skubal situation, right? He's going to cost $400 million. Scott Boras is his agent. Them being far off in negotiations is kind of a sham, but really losing like certain players at certain contracts is kind of inexcusable. That's what we see with Miami. They're more than okay with blowing everything up all the time, not even attempting. That's more of a farce on the sport than what the Dodgers are doing. And I think people who kind of argue against that really don't understand the root of the issue. So what do you think the root of the issue is here? I know we stand on the same side in regards to the salary cap, but as far as Bassett's comments go, what do you make of them and how he's been approaching that?
I mean, he's dead on with the parity angle because I mean, we just came from a season last year where we had the Reds, the Guardians, and the Tigers were all like middle to lower third of the league make the playoffs payroll wise. The Brewers won the best record in the National League. They had the very low payroll. And then you had the Mets with all their millions missed the playoffs. You got the Yankees out the first round. You got the Phillies out the first round. Like this is not a parity issue. I think the issue is more like you have two different sets of smart market owners. You have the markets like Milwaukee and Cleveland and Tampa all throw in there too with their stadium issues. Where it's like they've shown they have acumen to build a team, but they don't generate the local revenue that like allows them to compete consistently to give out these high price contracts. And Chris Annetti did an interview recently, the GM for the Guardians, like we can't play in the high end market. We have to make sure we're nailing our scouting and our player development. Like that's one thing. Then you have your teams like your Miamis, your A's, your Pirates, your Reds, who are just like putting the money they're getting from the league in their pockets and not spending it. Because the definition of the money you're getting is like, okay, it has to go to like, I think it's very vague term, basically like improvements to the organization or like improve the product. And then they could say, oh, we upgraded the locker room or we're putting more into minor league scouting and just not putting the money into actual payroll. I think there are mechanics you need to do to kind of direct some money to those Milwaukee's and Cleveland. Maybe you do what Rob Manfred's trying to do, where he's trying to get more of the local rights back under his helm. So he can like sell packages to generate more revenue that way. But like, the problem people don't understand is that the salary cap comes with a floor, and the floor is not like, okay, the Dodgers are 250, the floor is like 120. The floor is going to be like 180 if you do that. You're telling me you're going to see Miami and the A's and the Pirates spending $180 million every single season? I don't see it.
No. How many times has Miami done that combined?
I think maybe like I think maybe once ever.
No, the only time that they spent or went big was in '97. They won, and then they got rid of it. It's or actually, well, 2011, right? Or whenever the year it was when they got Reyes and
They got Reyes
Burley.
early, and they sipped all them out a year later.
Yeah, because they're anti-baseball. It's it's a tiring subject. I think there's 0% chance. I think there's also you and I have discussed this with our other good friend, who we don't want to name because he's in the industry.
Yeah, friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod. And the funny thing that comes up about it is that, and I've mentioned this, and I think we're all on the same page. It's also like a fight between the owners. Like it's really like Steve Cohen, Hal, Guggenheim.
Hal is also on record saying he wants cap. You forget
well,
that too.
Hal also came out and made statements too, saying like, I'm kind of tired of paying or giving money to teams like the Athletics that don't even do anything or make an attempt.
Yeah, I think with Hal talks out both sides of his mouth because Hal wants a cap, so he's not to compete with Cohen and the Dodgers at the rates they're paying for players. They have not gotten these top end guys, and he also does. He has a fair point. It's like, like, why am I taking my revenue and handing it to the Pirates for sticking in their pockets instead of actually putting it to improve their product?
Exactly, which he's totally right about. But the salary cap is just not going to happen. The players will never agree to it. They know that they're going to lose money across the board. Why would they ever agree to that? Because where does that money go? That goes right into the owner's pockets. So how does that benefit them?
You could look right at the NFL to see how the salary cap affects players because the stars will get paid regardless. The stars always get paid in one system here. And the players are posted for the correct reason that every dollar in a salary cap you're putting in a star's pocket, you're taking somebody else. So the middle class will get squeezed and get even more than they are now with the salary cap.
Yes. And I don't even think anyone should ever be making parallels with the NBA that try to do that. The NBA has 12 players per roster. They generate billions of dollars on more of a global sport than the majority of the sports in the United States. It's apples and oranges when you make that sort of comparison. So I always just find that to be a kind of really lazy narrative that people are kind of pushing out there. Ultimately, if you would have to make a guess, Mike, on what happens after the end of these negotiations and baseball will return, hopefully in 2027 on time, how do you see it going? I think we're kind of in an agreement. There's going to be changes to the luxury tax, kind of trying to stop exploiting loopholes that come with deferrals, or maybe just tax deferrals a different way, and a salary floor to an extent. I don't see a salary cap. I don't think baseball will ever see a salary cap.
There will not be a salary cap. And I think I think you brought the NBA up. I think that's where you should be looking for examples here because I think in the last CBA the NBA had, they came up with the apron system above the luxury tax, and that second apron, the way teams have it set up here, it's like the penalties if you were above that second apron are extreme in terms of roster building, where it's you can't, aggregate salaries in a trade. You have to match dollar for dollar and you're making moves. Your first round picks are frozen and drop at the end of the first round 7 years out. I think you see something like that where if you want to spend money at the level the Dodgers and the Mets are, you're going to pay a price team building wise to do that. I think that's what you end up settling on to sort of say the Dodgers, if you want to do this, you're going to have only $1 million in international bonus pool money, or you're going to lose, you're going to lose the ability to, take salary dump trade and stuff like that. I think they're going to make it very hard for you to just spend recklessly.
Yeah, I think that's a good point when bringing that up, and I should probably re-clarify on what I was saying in regards to the NBA in terms of salary payment. It's the amount of money some of these guys are going to get. I mean, the latest one that popped up with the Jalen Brunson extension, and this isn't supposed to catch anyone off guard. The guy could be making nearly $80 million a year. It's just bananas.
And he did him a favor last time, so he's not going to do him a favor again.
As long as they don't screw him, I'd hope so. I fear for Jalen Brunson on a level because of his stature, and guys like that don't age well in the NBA, and he takes a beating. I hope he stays healthy enough. I don't want to see an Isaiah Thomas 2.0 kind of situation. But man, imagine taking $100 million pay cut and still have the ability to make over $500 million in your career. The NBA is insane, and that's also from a guy who didn't make much money coming in too. So we'll see what happens. I'm more optimistic than most, and I think you are too about next year. Who's not optimistic to an extent. I mean, this also involves the CBA. Bryce Harper and the alleged story of him and Robert Manfred when he kind of floated the idea of a salary cap in the locker room. This has nothing to do with that, but this is more Phillies drama. I'm just saying, if you have drama about the New York Mets, show the same energy here. Dombrowski versus Bryce Harper. This is a battle, whether they want to admit it or not. This is a bad look. I don't think across any part of this sport, besides the bottom of the barrel franchises and how they handle things, did we see a public rift between the star player and basically the president of baseball operations and Dombrowski in Philadelphia. Dombrowski, right, to backpedal a little bit here, was saying that Harper isn't elite like his contract would say he's supposed to be. He's not that same type of player that we knew in his prime. He's still a top tier player, all-star level caliber player. I don't think he's ever going to be in the MVP conversation again like that. I'd be very surprised. But the comments of Dombrowski about basically the symbol of this Phillies team and Bryce Harper, this is a negative. This should have never been a thing. And I know Bryce does a good job of trying to diffuse it, but also kind of picking at the scab, if you will, with this. This should have been long and buried, and I know he tried to bury the hatchet with it, but the fact that it's come up again. Your thoughts?
Yeah, not good. Like if you're like, and the Phillies are in a very big pressure cooker situation where they're like, okay, we have to, our core aging, like we need to get something done now. They keep throwing big contracts out of big contracts. There's Harper, Trey Turner. They basically pay Castellanos to go away. You have Kyle Schwarber just re-upped. You have Zach Wheeler on his contract that he says he's going to retire after 27. They paid they're going to give Lazar probably more money at some point to keep the group together here. Like Nola's contract's a disaster. Like we know that's like just aging poorly. Like,
right.
Like this to me feels like that they like this. You worry here. Like, is there a crash coming with the Phillies? Where like
that's something I mention all the time.
Yeah, it's like you wonder here, like, has this group like hit its ceiling and now they can start tumbling down the mountain again? We saw this at the end of the dynasty run they had where they won the NL East all those years in a row. And then I think like Ryan Howard, tears his Achilles in a playoff game or something like that. And then they were never the same again after that. I wonder
2012, yeah.
I wonder if we're heading that way where the Phillies kind of, limp in as a wild card this year, and then they start fading again after that.
I think their pitching staff is still terrific when healthy. I think Zach Wheeler is still a huge question mark. He had TOC. I knew he had a little bit of a different surgery than what Harvey and Jaime Garcia and some of those guys had. But
he's got his rib in his locker, basically, according to what you hear.
I did not hear about that. That's bizarre, but Wheeler is an interesting guy. He's also in his mid-30s.
He publicly announced that he's retiring after his contract.
Exactly, yeah. He's just like, I want to spend time with my family. His wife did go to Iona for a few months. I do know that.
Yeah, I did check on the rib thing. It's in a bag in his closet.
That's even worse. Whatever. That's like Buffalo Bill level weird. So, yeah, with the Phillies and their outlook, I've said that, I say it all the time because I'm kind of sick of this Phillies core. I think the second that they lost to Arizona, it was done. That core was done. I think, and I thought it was done, and then I saw them lost to the Mets, and I'm like, oh, they're definitely done. They had a good regular season last year, won the division. Braves flamed out. Mets couldn't pitch. They won, even though they struggled away. And then we see that loss. First, that playoff loss, the way that it ended. I have never seen the New York Mets lose anything in the playoffs like that. Hell no. The Mets have never had a loss like that.
You wouldn't count Lucas Duda throwing the ball away in the World Series in there?
Because they made it to the World Series. They were in the world. They were playing defensively, and that wasn't the final play of the game.
Yeah.
Him throwing like that, like Wilmer Flores struck out looking. That was the end of that. Yeah. Cannot go to first base, like wherever it was horrible. It was horrible. Yeah. The locker room problems aren't going away. We hear that from Castellanos. You hear kind of like Schwarber's comments too. I'm not sure if you saw him talk about the Castellanos situation where he was basically asked, hey, do you think Castellanos was a distraction for you guys? And Schwarber's like taking there, like, kind of almost taking deep breaths.
Like, what should I say?
I don't know what I should say about that. Is that true? Is it not? And I think the longer the response to conjure up makes it worse. Harper is declining. We know all their star players, basically outside of like Christopher Sanchez, are over 30 or over.
With big contracts.
With big contracts, lengthy ones. Not even the AAV, they're lengthy.
Yeah,
Schwarber will probably age okay-ish, right? It could be a steep decline. We don't know, but he's still a prolific power hitter. Trey Turner had one of his best seasons, but got injured towards the end of the year. He's had an injury history. Harper, we know that injury history. Nola coming off of very mediocre, not living up to that contract. Wheeler's hurt. Luzardo's in a walk year. We'll see what ends up happening there. Christopher Sanchez, can he repeat it? I think he's a really good pitcher. I wouldn't be shocked if he does. Duran is awesome. I think it's just really Painter that they have coming up through the minor league system. I don't think Philly has that oomph anymore. And when there's this rift between a guy like Dombrowski, who we know loves to blow things up when they don't go his way, and especially purge the farm for the most part. He's an all-in kind of guy. I don't see how this ends well. I think Rob Thompson's going to be on the hook, and Don Mattingly is lurking in the background.
He's the manager waiting.
For me, would it shock me to what happens, like you were saying, if the Phillies win like around 88 games, they make it through the wild card? No, it wouldn't shock me. They're still a talented team and capable of winning ball games. However, I would not be shocked whatsoever if a team crashed and burned in the NL East this year, and it's the Philadelphia Phillies. It's already kind of looking like the Braves don't even have a chance to get out of the gate, right?
Yeah, but the Braves keep seeing pitchers go down like flies.
It's bad. It's bad in Atlanta. Health-wise. Talent-wise, no. Health-wise, yes.
Well, let me throw a crazy one by you on the Harper here. Like, this is something I think not this year, but would not shock you in the next like year or two here. Bryce Harper traded to the Yankees a year or two.
Nah.
I think it's a very
I know where you're coming from. I say no because of his age and declining. The contract isn't as bad, right? Because of the way they're aging. No way. I think Bryce's mentality. The Yankees would have to be in a really, I wouldn't say bad position because you're still getting a good hitter.
Think about it this way, though. Once Stanton's contract is up after next year,
okay,
you have a spot theoretically. You could DH Ben Rice, you could DH Judge, or theoretically, Bryce Harper comes in as your first baseman. They don't really have anybody coming up in that spot. And they could say, okay.
And how many years does Harper have left? At least 5?
His contract runs through 31.
Yeah, so five from that.
You basically get a 4-year commitment to Bryce Harper if you make that trade for the Yankees. It probably won't cost you much either. If Phillies be happy, probably in a year or two looking, okay, let's dump some money.
I know Bryce would welcome it.
Bryce would love hitting that ballpark.
He grew up a Yankees fan. He was devastated when the Yankees didn't reach out to him.
And it would be very
I don't think it's a bad theory. I've seen this floated before. I just think if there's a person to leave between these two here, it's going to be Dombrowski.
Yeah. I think they could both be gone in like 2 years.
I don't think that's far-fetched to say either. And Philly says blow it up.
Yeah, and if you're the Phillies and like you're looking at this, say, okay, like if Bryce Harper, is good in 26, he's good in 27, and you're saying, okay, we have to, kind of move some money off the books here because let's say they do have this onerous luxury tax thing we propose in here, and they say we can't do this, like to build a team the way we have here. The Yankees are going to have a lot of money coming off the books in like 2 years. They say, okay, star, like born, like want to be a Yankee since he's a kid. He's gonna hit 35 home runs in our at the short.
But I get it, but it's like an older-ish player with 4 years remaining on his contract with injury history. That's not really play a position. I know where you're coming from, and I think everything is like it's a legitimate argument and an angle. And I wouldn't be shocked if that were to happen. However, the way the Yankees have been operating, and I know you mentioned money off the books, I think the Yankees at that point in time will be ushering in a new era. Because then if they don't win with Judge at that point, right? Say the Yankees actually don't win anything. Say they miss the playoffs in one of these next 2 years, which is not completely far-fetched. They, at worst, will make a wild card, but the division is difficult. You're sitting there and Aaron Judge is like 30-something years old. Cole is still there. And you say to yourself, okay, the core and foundation on our team needs to get Bryce Harper. That's just kind of where I don't think that move makes sense or works for the Yankees at that point in time. I would have to say that the Yankees are so well positioned that guys have developed so well, like George Lombard, right? And even Spencer Jones is a player that, Harper could be a welcomed addition. But if Harper's like, say, the Bellinger move of this offseason, I don't think that's a good outlook for the Yankees.
Yeah, but
Not a bad one, but that's not where they should be by their standards.
no, but like their
I think
standards
it's
are
gonna
lower.
break down.
Like they have made these kinds of moves a lot though, where they get the guy because I saw this on multiple fronts that they do not go out anymore and go sign the top hitter on the market that's not from their own team. Like obviously they've kept Judge, they wanted to keep Soto, they kept Bellinger. Like they don't go get like Bo Bichette or Kyle Tucker or they pass on Harper the first time when the situation.
Right.
At that point, Bellinger's probably opting out of the contract. Garrett Cole is on his final year. Rodon's on his final year. The only money you really have beyond 28 at that point, guaranteed, is Judge and Max Fried. So they could definitely take Bryce Harper if they want to.
They could. It's not a question of fiscally being able to do it. They're the Yankees. They're going to be able to do whatever they want within reason. But like, look at the games played since 2021. 141, pretty decent. 99, not good. 126, not good. 145, okay, pretty good. And then 132. He's missing at least 30 games in 3 of the past 5 seasons.
But if it's only costs you taking on the contract, you basically give them nothing but a basic bag of baseballs back to the
But
Phillies.
also, you're also saying 2 years from now, too.
Yeah, what if he has like a monster 27? I could definitely see the Yankees doing it then.
Monster 27? I actually I just don't see him having a monster 27. I think the best years are behind Bryce. The only way he has a monster year is if he stays healthy, and I am not convinced Bryce Harper will ever be a healthy player again. In fact, he gets Judge gets a worse rep about health than Harper does. Harper is the most broken superstar when it comes to being healthy.
Yeah, the luxury tax hit though for Bryce Harper at that point, only 25 a year. That's nothing for
it's nothing at that point. Ryan Howard was getting paid 25 at that point. The contracts are going to age well like that. Yeah. I don't think Bryce Harper will, and that's pretty much the big thing for me.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah. Do or die year for the Phillies, I would say. I just everything for them depending on how they shape up in the playoffs, right? Say you face Los Angeles, however way it shakes out. If you face Los Angeles first and they lose, I don't think fans will be as upset. That kind of was like the case this year. They have to make the NLCS. If they don't make the NLCS and if they don't win the division, there is that obvious, kind of pressure coming down that somebody's losing their job, which is why I think Rob Thompson is the odd man out. I think it's so evident to me.
Oh, he's 100% hot.
Absolutely. And I don't even think it's necessarily his fault. Yeah, and I guess the final thing with the Phillies and the Mets, and I know because people want to like compare like the salaries, Mike, right? Like, the Mets have this salary cap, this or that. They're more in year 2 of the Juan Soto era and year 3 of the David Stearns era. They are deep in this Phillies window. This is they have a smaller window right now. The Mets are
about like year 5 of the Philly window, basically.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of being generous, I guess. Right. So, man, I just got to say there's no one team. I think the number of teams that have the most pressure in baseball, in my opinion, you could tell me if you disagree or not, and we'll end this right here. Number 1 is the Yankees. Number 2 is the Philadelphia Phillies. And I think right there next to them is the New York Mets. I think those 3 teams in Major League Baseball have the most pressure on them to win this year. The Yankees, because they're the Yankees, they have Aaron Judge. They have the high payroll and a weak American League. And I know that Toronto's there. But Philly, with their window, feeling like that they should have gone to the World Series in 2023 because they were that good, they end up choking against the Diamondbacks, and they've been slowly getting worse each season in terms of their accomplishments.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think those are probably the 3.
And then the Mets spend too much money not to be in that conversation, and they haven't won in 40 years. So, point taken. And the other 2 teams had won in 08 and 09. I just think the Mets have a little bit of leeway right now because they had clean slate, but they're still top 3. So, how would you go about that?
I think it's probably the right order. I think those 2 definitely are up there. And I think the Mets also, just because. Not even that they had cleaned the slate, but just that they made the controversial choice to move on from all their guys who've been there for a while. So,
right.
if it
better
doesn't,
work.
it's basically it's like a better work situation. Because like if they make the playoffs and P hits like 50 home runs for the Orioles, like then there will like be more of these pieces about like the Mets should have just paid him.
Yeah, he hits number 50 in Citi Field in September, or he could just have a golden sombrero against Nolan McLean. We'll see what ends up happening there. But thank you guys so much for coming to the first episode of the 9. We're going to be here on a weekly basis alongside you, Stadium. Tons of fun. Get ready for new graphics, more topics on a broader sense. 3 topics on the Mets, 3 topics on the Yankees, and then 3 broad topics across Major League Baseball, thus filling out the 9 subjects. Mike, everyone can go and follow you where?
At Twitter, mphillips331, same on Instagram and TikTok. So the same across the board there for social clips. Just in the Suffering Podcast, my personal podcast, did a lot of stuff there. This week on the episode here, we did an NBA crossover episode with the guys in the Sorry to Interrupt podcast. Always a fun time here. And we shared some tanking solutions for the NBA's tanking problem. So we had some ideas we threw out there. And like the Star Wars stuff, the Sky Guys package. We're revisiting season 2 of The Mandalorian right now because the movie's coming out here. And that trailer dropped this week. So we're going to be breaking that down next week on the pod.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. One thing I will say about that kind of stuff in general, it's not Star Wars related. I finally just saw Edward Norton's Incredible Hulk for the first time in since I saw 10 minutes on TBS 20 years ago, whenever the hell it came out. Underrated. I liked it. It wasn't bad.
Yeah, it was fine.
Well, all things considered, from what I was hearing, and I knew there was a lot of rights issues between who's able to buy it, and Universal owned them, and then they didn't want to sell to Marvel, and then Disney was involved. I actually saw it for the first time. That was the only one out of the whatever you call it, from the Iron Man up until Endgame. That was the only movie that I didn't see the bunch. I just saw it yesterday. I was like, oh, it's pretty good. Edward Norton, not bad. Mark Ruffalo made more sense. But that's kind of all I have to add to that sort of stuff there. Going to be on the Oscar watch very soon to try and tune into all those. You guys can always follow me at Martino Puccio everywhere, doing stuff with You Stadium, that Milan podcast with, if you are on this YouTube channel at the current moment, that's probably where you came from outside of all the other clips that we have. A lot of exciting stuff on the horizon. Should be having more betting previews and World Baseball Classic previews coming up very soon, as well as some more guests. Other than that, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and take care.